Mackenzie, why are you marching so fast? Just practicing marching in ordinary quick time, Sergeant. No, just ordinary time. Yes, ordinary quick time. No, ordinary time. Quick time is faster. Do you mean doubly quick? Doubly quick? Doubly quick? No, not doubly quick. That is even faster than wheeling time. Wheeling time? Doesn't that have something to do with wagons? Wagons? What, wagons? Really, wagons? Yes, but wagons. You know, those things with wheels. Mackenzie, as a matter of fact, I think it does have something to do with wagons. And speaking of wagons, do you see that wagon over there? You mean that one over there by the cookhouse? Yes. That one that's full... What is it full of? Are those potatoes? Yes indeed. You are correct.
The image of resolute soldiers marching bravely across the battlefield is perhaps the most popular conception of the Napoleonic soldier. Although this was without a doubt a facet of warfare in that age, the modern conception of what foot and arms drill entails is not wholly appropriate when we discuss the reality of the way the soldiers of the British and Empire armies marched and maneuvered under arms in the early 19th century. While the theatre and embellishment attached to modern ceremonial evolutions was certainly not part of the style and utility of Napoleonic drill, movement and the carriage of arms was highly regulated in the army of that time. To this end, a series of positions and movements governed the way the soldier carried and manipulated his firelock. This was known as the manual exercise. The version practiced in the early 1800s was itself an evolution of those used in the 18th century, and was generally similar, though differing in detail in some regards. One important aspect in examining the manual exercise and the maneuver in the era of the Peninsular War was the dichotomy that existed between the manual, or official practices, and the reality of what was done in the field. The foundation manual to this era was the 1792 Rules and Regulations, and this was heavily influenced by the work of General David Dundas. He was a man of the 18th century German school, and his theories bore strict resemblance to models of drill and maneuver as practiced by the armies of Frederick the Great of Prussia. His theories held sway in official circles and were manifest in his famous 18 maneuvers that were apt to be performed by any given battalion during a review. His pedantic and somewhat formal approach to battle earned him the nickname Old Pivot. The reality of maneuver in the field, especially in the Peninsula and in other theatres, appears to be rather different, and was in stark contrast to the methods promulgated by Old Pivot. First and foremost, although not relating directly to the manual exercise, was the near universal use of the two-rank line versus the prescribed three-rank organization of Dundas. While differences between the manual and the reality in the field could fill volumes and is somewhat outside the scope of this video, and even the channel, these kinds of paradoxes existed at the individual level as well. It appears that there were other positions and movements not officially contained within the manual, but that were commonly practiced. For instance, the position of the shoulder, perhaps the most formal, but not the most adaptable position, was prescribed for nearly every occasion, and the emphasis was placed upon enforcing the use of this position for extended times in order to accustom the men to do so. In practice, it would seem that other, more adaptable positions were maintained in use, such as the trail and the slope, neither of which were contained in the manual. For purposes of completeness, these positions and movements are included in the video. The references for this video are the 1807 Rules and Regulations. This was a somewhat abridged, though official book for the use of NCOs, and is a compilation of the manual and platoon exercises of 1804 and various evolutions of squad, company, and battalion drill. Importantly, the work of Captain Suasso, published in 1816, gives valuable insight. Although published after Waterloo, it largely reflects on what might be termed past practices of the Peninsular Army in particular, and paints a picture of a far more professional and adaptable army than would be considered in the 1792 Dundas book. There are in fact many other works that demonstrate the reality of the Peninsular Army in particular, but also those in action around the world, in North America and elsewhere. As this video deals with material from the early 1800s, I've had to rely on artwork, chiefly to illustrate the various positions and topics. There obviously was no photography in the age, and paintings and engravings are the only images available. I feel that it is important to caveat these examples, as they may have been chosen to best demonstrate the subject at hand, but of course may suffer in other details as the artist's impressions may have been flawed or incorrect. Poor hand or foot placement, as well as other minor details of dress, may all suffer some inaccuracy. The order of the presentation of the various movements in this video has been modified slightly from the text to effect a somewhat more logical approach to what in effect is an instructional video. Although marching and maneuver are not the subject of this video, some degree of familiarity needs to be had in regards to the cadences of marching used in the era. There were 3 official cadences and 1 unofficial. Ordinary time of 75 paces per minute, quick time of 108 paces per minute, and wheeling or quickest time of 120 paces per minute. You'll at once notice the absence of any form of running. It was of course used in certain circumstances, and I have used the term double quick, as this seems to be a colloquial term used to describe this action. Especially as the Peninsular War developed, it would seem that this cadence became increasingly useful, and resultantly, the battalions of the Peninsular Army became increasingly adept at maneuvering in certain circumstances in this difficult signature. This would appear officially for the first time in the 1824 Field Exercise and Evolutions of Infantry, and would ratify past practices at 150 paces per minute. Cadences were measured by a plummet. This example of simple physics was a weight, often a musket ball, suspended on a string, marked at certain distances. By allowing the plummet to swing at these distances, it would reciprocate at the appropriate cadence. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Wheeling time referred to the cadence used when subunits of the battalion wheeled into position. Changing from column to line would be such an example. Here, a company wheels from line into column of sections. So, without further ado, the positions and movements of the manual exercise, circa 1804 to 1815. The position of attention, or order arms, was a transitionary position from the more relaxed stand at ease through to other positions such as the shoulder or the fixing of bayonets. It brought the man, as its name implies, to a state ready to move or receive other commands. The position of stand at ease was the most relaxed position afforded the man. Used for periods of waiting or when movement was not anticipated, the position was the same, whether the bayonet was fixed or not. The position of shoulder arms was the default way in which the firelock was carried. Standing on parade, the men were to fall in and remain in this position. The shoulder was used when marching in all cadences: ordinary time of 75 paces per minute, quick time of 108 paces per minute, and in wheeling or the quickest time of 120 paces per minute. It was also the position from which loading and firing evolutions were conducted. The shoulder was a somewhat formal way to carry the firelock, but in the context of the era, it was the traditional position. It was also used as a position of respect, used by sentries when in the presence of a visiting officer. Officially, this was the primary way in which a man would carry his firelock when maneuvering in the field. There is evidence to suggest, however, that this was not always the case, and positions such as the slope and the trail became much more commonplace as the Peninsular War raged on. More on those positions later. The shoulder was also referred to as the carry, and commands existed in the manual using that terminology. The position of present arms was the formal way a soldier would pay compliments to senior officers, colours, or other significant persons, such as royalty. Done individually or as a group, its intent was the same. It would be executed on command, or in the case of an individual seeing himself in such a position, would do it by himself, to the senior rank present. The position of port arms was used as a way to convey readiness to act with the bayonet. This could manifest itself during the passing of sentries evolution. And perhaps more importantly, the position was used as a preliminary to the charge, or other more general advances upon the enemy. Here is an example of the use of the port, as seen during the evolution of the inspection of arms. After moving to the shoulder and opening the pan, the firelock was brought to the port so that the lock and environs could be inspected for cleanliness and serviceability. Subsequent to this step, the pan was shut and the firelock was returned to the order for the inspection of the barrel and bayonet. Charge bayonets. This was the position that brought the man from a position ready to act to one that facilitated the actual use of the bayonet. It was adopted in the last moments of the charge, or at any time when the bayonet was about to be used, whether in attack or defense. Seen here, a demonstration of the charge, combining the use of the port and charge bayonets. Beginning the advance in ordinary time, then breaking into quick time, and finally into the double quick, as the assault is delivered and the firelock brought down to the charge. Advance arms was a peculiar position that existed from long before the Napoleonic era and lasted until 1896. Its use is frustratingly vague, but it was an administrative position, used when a junior NCO was acting in command of a squad, or in place of a senior NCO. It had other minor applications, but it certainly was not used on parade generally by men standing in the ranks. Nor was it simply an alternative to the shoulder. The advance could be used in ordinary and quick time. Now, nothing would preclude it from being used in wheeling time, but as the advance wasn't used in ranks generally, the point is rather moot. Secure arms was a position used in inclement weather to protect the lock and the powder within. Sentries were permitted to move about and march their beat in this position. The position of support arms was an alternative to the shoulder, and used on informal occasions when on the march or when acting as a sentry. The nature of the position gave a modicum of relief from the constant carrying of arms, and could be used when standing at ease. The aforementioned movements and positions were those that were prescribed as part of the manual exercise. But there were other movements and positions used outside of those already prescribed. Perhaps termed unofficial, their use is supported in various treatises as well as anecdotal examples. Perhaps the most useful of these is a work by Captain Suasso entitled A Treatise on the British Drill and Exercise of the Company, with an introduction to the field exercise of the battalion, explaining the different posts and situations of every individual in the battalion during the performance of its movements. Whew! This was published in 1816. Although, of course, you will make note of the fact that this date postdates the Napoleonic Wars, it is widely regarded as being exemplary of retroactively describing the way the army actually conducted its business. In fact, a codification, as it were, of past practices used during the Peninsular War and other theaters. This is an important aspect, as it sheds light, in conjunction with other evidence, that the British Army that was forged in the Peninsula became greatly evolved from the pedantic plodding nature, as may have been exemplified by Old Pivot himself, Dundas. The article entitled Several Motions of the Firelock Not Comprehended in the Manual Exercise is particularly telling. Here, he mentions that these positions and movements are in common use, but not, even at this late date, officially in the manual exercise. Among others, a few stand out. Trail arms. The trail was a convenient way of carrying the firelock when extended, conducting light infantry duties, or when maneuvering within the battalion framework. It could be adopted from either the order or the shoulder, and could be used in all cadences: ordinary time, quick time, wheeling time, and while moving at the double quick, which itself was not contained in the manual, but had by the peninsula become very common for even complex movements. The slope was strangely mentioned in the text of the manual exercise, although there it's noted as something that sentries were not to do. Strangely, it's mentioned in the context of everyone knowing what it is, but having no explanation for it in the body of the book. The slope, however, was, by many accounts, a common position. It could be used in all cadences, including ordinary, quick, wheeling, and the unofficial double quick. It represented a more comfortable, stable, and less fatiguing alternative to the shoulder. Indeed, its use was ratified in Suasso as well as the 1823 manual exercise, itself a codification of peninsular best practices. The position of recover arms was a curious one, separate and distinct, yet remotely similar to the recover as outlined in the platoon exercise. There, the recover was used to hold the firelock while cocking in preparation to fire. The recover, as demonstrated as part of the manual exercise, was a position used while addressing officers. It was also the position used when executing the dismissal evolution off parade. Although demonstrated from the shoulder here, according to Suasso, it could also be executed from the order. Here we see an example of the dismissal evolution as practiced early in the era.
Recover! Out!
To the right, face! Break!
In the 1823 exercise, the dismissal formally incorporated the easing of springs in preparation for the storage of the firelock. As the 1823 exercise was generally representative of past practice, it might be assumed that this drill was used in the latter Napoleonic era.
Recover! Out!
Ease! Springs! Right! Face! Lodge! Arms!
So this gives an outline to the various positions contained within the manual exercise, as well as some of those that were nominally associated. For purposes of instruction, the various movements were broken into parts, each practiced in detail. An important part of the preamble to the manual exercise was the setting of the lock to half cock and the hammer, or what we would today call the frizzen, being closed. This was the default position in which the firelock was maintained whilst the man was under arms. Part of the dismissal evolution was in fact to return the lock to the fired state with the springs eased, this done in preparation for storage of the firelock. Although the default position to hold the firelock was at the shoulder, here we'll start with the position of attention and progress through the movements from there. The position of attention, or order arms, was thus. The man stood upright and square to the front. His feet were held with the heels together and the toes apart at 60 degrees. The firelock was held at the right side with the butt on the ground and the sling to the front by the right hand, which was placed flat against it, thumb to the front. The arms hung straight down in a purposeful yet relaxed manner, and the hands were open but not rigidly flat. The shoulders were square and the head erect. Stand at ease from the position of attention.
Stand at ice!
On the word of command, the hands were drawn across the front of the body, with one hand inside the other. They were moved directly, and the right arm encompassed the musket. Simultaneous to this, the right foot was drawn back so that the right instep was behind the left heel. As mentioned in the video preamble, the position and movement was the same whether the bayonet was fixed or unfixed. Note how the weight was shifted to the rear, with most of it being borne by the right foot. Mention must be made of the specific hand placement. As originally shown, the right hand was placed on the outside of the left. Here, an alternate was with the grip reversed. Interestingly, the text doesn't differentiate between the two, and does not mention specific details regarding this. attention from stand at ease. The command, as mentioned in the text, is the full word of attention, given thus.
Attention!
Now this is in contrast to the modern and somewhat historical application of its abbreviated form of simply shun, given thus.
Squad! Shun!
For the purposes of this video, I have used the word as printed in the book.
Attention!
On the word of command, the hands and the feet were simply returned to the position of attention. Note also that the right hand maintained its grip on the outside of the firelock. Fix bayonets at the order.
Fix! Bayonets!
On the command fix, the right hand changed its grip to one with the thumb behind the firelock. On the command bayonets, the right hand pushed the firelock forward slightly. Simultaneous to this, the left hand moved and gripped the hilt of the bayonet, pulling it from the scabbard. As the tip cleared the scabbard, it was rotated, tip up, and placed on the muzzle of the firelock. Note the zigzag pattern of the slot cut into the socket. Upon the bayonet being fully seated, the firelock was drawn back to the position of attention and the left hand cut to the side. Note that the movement was conducted in a single, fluid, efficient motion. The unfixing of bayonets was not officially part of the manual exercise. It will be covered later in the video. Shoulder arms from the order.
Shoulder! Arms!
On the cautionary shoulder, the right hand regripped the firelock with the thumb behind. On the command arms, the right hand raised the firelock, twisting it across the front of the body so that the barrel faced the front. The left hand gripped the bottom of the butt with the thumb wrapped round the heel. There was no pause during this movement, and as the firelock was brought to the left side and gripped with the left hand, the right hand was withdrawn immediately, leaving the firelock in a vertical position at the left shoulder. Order arms from the shoulder.
Order! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the firelock at the swell. In the second part, the right hand assumed control of the firelock and drew it down to the right side, held at the trail. Note how the butt was held about 6 inches off the ground. In the third part, the weapon was brought to the position of order arms, and the hand regripped with the thumb in front of the sling. Movements from the shoulder. Present arms from the shoulder.
Present! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the firelock was rotated in the left hand so that the lock faced the front. Simultaneous to this, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the stock. In the second part, the right hand raised the firelock up to the center of the body. Simultaneous to this, the left hand quit the butt and moved smartly to a position with the hand flat, placed against the sling, just forward of the trigger guard. The left wrist was to rest upon the trigger guard, and the point of the left thumb was to be at eye level. This position was also known as the poise. In the third part, the firelock was dropped vertically down to the fullest extent of the right arm, while being rotated so that the sling faced the front. The grip of the right hand was to remain with the fingers together. The firelock remained vertical, with the butt advanced slightly. Note the change in hand position of the left hand, from being flat against the sling to an all-around grip with the thumb uppermost, holding the firelock just below the swell. Simultaneous to this, the right foot was moved to a position similar to that of stand at ease, with the instep behind the left heel. Shoulder arms from the present.
Shoulder! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the right hand assumed control of the firelock around the small of the butt, and it moved it directly to the left side, rotating it so that the barrel faced the front. The left hand quit the forestock below the swell and moved to its position of shoulder arms underneath the butt. Simultaneous to this, the right foot was brought back up to the position of attention. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. The firelock remained in position, held vertically at the left side. Port arms from the shoulder.
Port arms!
On the command, the right hand came across and gripped the firelock at the small of the butt. Simultaneously, the firelock was brought across the front of the body, held at a 45-degree angle, with the lock to the front. The left hand quit the position on the butt and moved to grip the firelock at the swell, with an all-around grip. The thumbs of both hands pointed towards the muzzle. You'll notice that this movement was completed in an expeditious way, without any pause. Charge bayonets from the port.
Charge! Bayonets!
On the word of command, the firelock was brought down to the right hip, presenting the bayonet to the front and slightly elevated. Simultaneous to this, the body was pivoted on the heels to the right at approximately 45 degrees. This brought the left foot to point straight to the front and the right foot to point to the right. Shoulder arms from charge bayonets.
Shoulder! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the right hand assumed control of the firelock, bringing it up across the front of the body back to the position of shoulder arms, with the barrel vertical, facing the front. Simultaneous to this, the body was rotated on the heels back to the proper front, and the left hand quit the swell and repositioned at the butt of the firelock. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Advance arms from the shoulder.
Advance! Arms! 2. 3. 4.
In the first part, the firelock was rotated in the left hand so that the lock faced the front. Simultaneous to this, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. In the second part, the right hand moved the firelock to the position of the poise, as was found with the present. The left hand quit the butt and was placed smartly on the sling with the wrist on the trigger guard, and the tip of the thumb was at eye level. In the third part, the firelock was dropped to the right side, being rotated so that the sling faced the front. The left hand assumed an all-around grip at the swell, and the right hand transitioned to a grip with the thumb and forefinger around the trigger guard and the remaining fingers behind the cock. In the fourth part, the left hand was cut away to the position of attention. The firelock remained vertical at the right side, with the lock at the hip and the barrel pressed in to the right shoulder. Shoulder arms from the advance. Now, the text concerning the shoulder from the advance in the 1804 exercise is somewhat vague in its description of the movement, so here I offer some interpretations. The text doesn't indicate any movement of the right hand until it quits the firelock in the third part. As can be seen here, this is not achievable without some sort of change in the grip of the right hand. As a possible solution to this, I offer this interpretation.
Shoulder! Arms! 2. 3.
In the first part, the left hand came across and gripped the firelock at the swell. In the second part, the firelock was rotated across the front of the body. The right hand simultaneously changed its grip to the wrist, and the butt was placed in the palm of the left hand at the left side. Now, the specifics of the right hand are not mentioned in the text, but some degree of stability is required as the firelock is brought to the left shoulder. And in the third part, the right arm was cut away to the position of attention. A slightly less conventional interpretation might have the right hand even gripping the firelock above the lock. Additionally, it is well known that the subsequent edition of the manual exercise, that of 1823, was simply a codified version of practices that had been commonplace during the Napoleonic Wars. Herein, the explanation of the shoulder from the advance is much clearer, and indicates an immediate change of the grip of the right hand during the first part. So, if we take the 1823 exercise as being a ratification of past practice, then this version of the movement could be considered appropriate for the Napoleonic time period.
Shoulder! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the left hand came across the body and gripped the firelock below the swell. Simultaneously, the right hand quit the grip of the trigger guard and moved to the small. In the second part, the right hand assumed control of the firelock and moved it directly to the left side, turning it so that the barrel faced the front. The left hand quit the forestock and moved to the butt in the position of shoulder arms. In the third part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Secure arms from the shoulder.
Secure! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the small. In the second part, the left hand quit the butt and moved to a position gripping the barrel at the swell, with the back of the hand facing the front. In the third part, the right hand quit the small, while the left hand allowed the firelock to come down in an arc, with the barrel stopping at approximately 45 degrees, with the sling uppermost. Note the simultaneous movement of the firelock and the right arm. Shoulder arms from the secure.
Shoulder! Arms! 2, 3.
In the first part, the left hand raised the firelock up to the position of shoulder arms, whilst the right hand came across and grabbed the small. In the second part, the left hand quit the barrel and gripped the butt in the position of shoulder arms. In the third part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Support arms from the shoulder.
Support! Arm! 2, 3.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. The firelock was maintained in its position of shoulder arms. In the second part, the left hand quit the butt, and by bending the left elbow was brought across the front of the body. The left hand maintained its grip at the small of the butt. The movement of the left arm was such that the lock was held in the bend of the left elbow. In the third part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention, leaving the firelock supported in the crook of the left elbow. Stand at ease from the support.
Stand at ice!
On the word of command, the right arm came across, and the right hand re-gripped the small of the butt. Simultaneous to this, the right foot was drawn back to the position of stand at ease. Attention from the stand at ease while at the support.
Attention!
On the word of command, both the right arm and the right foot reassumed the position of attention. Shoulder arms from the support, using the command carry arms. Carry arms.
2, 3.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. In the second part, the left hand quit its position across the chest, straightened and re-gripped the butt in the position of shoulder arms. And in the third part, the right hand quit the small of the butt and reassumed the position of attention. As mentioned in the preamble to the video, there were a number of positions that were not specifically mentioned as being part of the manual exercise. Unfix bayonets.
Unfix! Bayonets!
On the word of command, unfix, the right hand changed its grip, bringing the thumb behind the firelock. On the command bayonets, the right hand pushed the firelock slightly forward. Simultaneously, the left hand came across and gripped the firelock just above the upper sling swivel. As the left hand gripped the firelock, the right hand quit its position and, with the web of the thumb, pushed the bayonet off the muzzle. As the bayonet cleared the firelock, the tip was turned down and towards the scabbard with the right hand. The left hand assisted its replacement in the scabbard, and once the evolution was complete, the hands and the firelock returned to the position of order arms. Trail arms from the order.
Trail! Arms!
On the command trail, the right hand regripped the firelock with the thumb behind the barrel. On the command arms, the firelock was thrown up with the right hand and gripped at the swell. The weapon was to hang at an angle with the muzzle up. Order arms from the trail.
Order! Arms!
On the word of command, the firelock was allowed to slip through the right hand. The butt was placed on the ground in the position of attention, and the right hand regripped the firelock with the thumb in front of the barrel. Trail arms from the shoulder.
Trail! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the right hand came across and gripped the firelock at the swell. In the second part, the right hand assumed control of the firelock and brought it down to the right side, held at a gentle angle with the muzzle up. The left hand, after quitting the butt, remained in the position of attention. Shoulder arms from the trail.
Shoulder! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the right hand brought the firelock across the body, rotating it so that the barrel pointed to the front. The left hand gripped the butt in the position of shoulder arms. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Slope arms from the shoulder.
Slope! Arms!
On the word of command, the left hand was raised, creating a 90-degree bend in the left elbow, allowing the firelock to cant back on the shoulder at a 45-degree angle. Note that despite the movement of the firelock, it still pointed straight to the rear. Shoulder arms from the slope.
Shoulder! Arms!
On the word of command, the left hand was lowered so that the arm straightened. This brought the firelock back to the front of the shoulder, reassuming the familiar position of shoulder arms. Recover arms from the shoulder.
Recover! Arms!
On the command, the left hand twisted the firelock so that the lock faced the front. Simultaneous to this, the right hand came across and gripped the small of the butt. The right hand continued twisting the firelock so that the sling faced the front, and the left hand quit the butt and moved to a position just above the trigger guard. Note that in this position, the firelock was held adjacent to the left shoulder. Shoulder arms from the recover.
Shoulder! Arms! 2.
In the first part, the firelock was twisted in the right hand so that the barrel faced the front. Simultaneously, the left hand quit the swell and moved to the position of shoulder arms. In the second part, the right hand was cut away to the position of attention. Of course, the manual exercise as presented thus far has been done very much in the guise of a training evolution. Trained men would rarely have to perform the manual exercise broken down into its constituent parts. And, to that end, the individual parts of the movements were combined, observing a pause between them. This pause amounted to the equivalent of 3 beats of ordinary time. This results in a much slower rhythm to the movements than modern viewers might be accustomed to. Although there was direction in the manual stipulating that the manual exercise was not necessarily a given for all reviews, the performance thereof would certainly not be above the request of an inspecting officer during a review or other parade. In those cases, the manual exercise would have been performed as intended, with the individual complete movements demonstrated to the appropriate words of command.
Secure! Arms! Shoulder! Ready, set! Arms! Shoulder! Arms! Port! Arms! Charge! Minutes! Shoulder! Arms! Advance! Arms! Shoulder! Arms! Support! Arms!
Carry.
Arms!
The uniform worn in this video is that of the 78th Highlanders, as may have been worn during the 100 Days campaign, which culminated in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. The 78th were not present at the battle, but the 2nd Battalion, 78th Highlanders, did perform garrison duties in the Low Countries during that campaign. The details of the kit and equipment and the uniform have been covered previously in Part 8 of the kit series, but perhaps some mention of the variations seen here. These are primarily matters of accoutrements. The soldier was issued a cartridge pouch and belt, as well as that for the bayonet. In addition, his knapsack carried all his worldly possessions. In any kind of static garrison or camp, this would be all he needed. But if the battalion was to go into the field, or on any kind of march or transit, these basic items would be supplemented with a haversack and water bottle. These two items were not part of the man's personal kit, and would be withdrawn once their need ceased. So we see in the video examples of full kit, personal kit, and that without the knapsack. Conceivably, all of the movements demonstrated in the video would have had to be executed at one point or another in any of these three guises. Typically, any kind of battalion parade or inspection or field day would see the men wearing their knapsacks. Perhaps whilst acting as a sentry, or performing some other ceremonial evolution, the knapsack would be omitted. Only in the field would the complete equipment, including the aforementioned haversack and water bottle, be carried. Despite my efforts to remain as historical as possible, an error does exist. The eagle eye amongst you will have noticed that our hapless Private Mackenzie was on parade during the introduction with his lock in the fired position. This, of course, is incorrect, and once the man was under arms, the firelock should have been carried in the half-cock position with the hammer or frizzen closed. Don't worry, or rather he, has peeled countless potatoes since. Oh, and of course the use of the term doubly quick during the introduction is also incorrect, the term, of course, being double quick. So that concludes the presentation on the manual exercise as used during the Napoleonic Wars. While not an extensive study of maneuver and foot drill, it does, however, serve to demonstrate how the firelock was carried and manipulated whilst the man was under arms. The manual exercise would continue to evolve, becoming more and more complete, with all options for transitioning between positions covered within the instruction. Minor omissions of the Napoleonic era, such as the movement from the advance to the order, would be added as the next version of the exercise was published in 1823. From that point, the manual exercise would remain essentially unchanged, with positions as outlined here becoming familiar to generation upon generation of Victorian-era soldiers, until relatively significant reforms were instituted in 1896. For those of you who are interested in this kind of thing, there is a playlist on the channel just for you. Simply entitled Drill, It contains all the videos dealing with the manual exercises, laterally known as the rifle exercises, the platoon exercises, known as the firing exercises later in the era, and of course the bayonet exercise, published to date. I hope that this resource proves beneficial to those reenactors, living historians, or researchers who would otherwise be without. I must extend my deepest gratitude to friend of the channel Ewan, who, through many hours of enlightening conversation, provided expert counsel on this project. If you're in need of high-quality Napoleonic or Victorian equipment, then go no further than Graham the Leather Guy. Belts, pouches, knapsacks, and valises are all made with the utmost attention to detail and will suit all manner of historical shooting or living history usage. If you'd like to support the channel, please stop by our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. For more information on projects and updates between videos, follow us on our Facebook page. As an alternative to YouTube or Patreon, as indeed both these platforms have become somewhat troublesome for content as found on this channel, may I suggest following British Muzzleloaders on Utreon. Link is in the description below.